Hi, I'm Donna with Charles Bridge Publishing, and I am with the marketing department. I have here Monica Perez. Hi, Monica.
Hi, Donna.
Is editor of Above All Else, and Marietta Zacker of Zacker Galt Lit Agency, who is Dana Alison Levy's agent, and right below me, Dana Alison Levy, author of Above All Else. People are starting to come in and trickle in, so we'll give them a few minutes. But I just want to let you know that if you hover over your video screen, you can see the little chat button at the bottom. So that'll open up your chat screen. Everyone's going to be silent, but you can feel free to send us questions, comments, whatever you like in the chat screen. And Monica will be paying attention to that.
Yep.
All right, thanks so much. I'm going to disappear for a little while, but you'll be in good hands.
Okay, great. Thanks, Donna. Thanks so much. I think what I'm going to start with is I'm going to share our cover. Hopefully that will work here. Let's see. So everyone can see. Super excited about this particular book. Dana and I have been working together on it. This is our first book that we've worked on together. And it's just been, from my side of things, a really wonderful experience. Basically, Dana's like a dream author. She's just, so smart and just so easy to work with, and just takes any kind of comment and just runs with it, and comes back with something that I could not have imagined, and is really great. So I sort of, I think it's really kind of rare for us to have talks like this. Sometimes you have an editor author talk, but we have the agent who's been involved in this, as well here. And so I kind of would like to almost start with you, Marietta, and then understand, like, how did this book come to you, and when a book like this comes to you, what happens? Like, that's really the beginning of the process.
Fantastic. Well, hello everyone, and welcome, and glad to see you. I suppose. Glad that you're here, and yeah, Monica, thanks. It's Dana and I have worked for a number of years now on her middle grade novels. This was her first young adult novel. And it was a conversation that we had for years and years. Dana, you may remember exactly how many years, but it was, years of talking about Dana's interest in Mount Everest in general, but also on Nepal and the people of Nepal, and what it means to do something as interesting, but also as life-changing as climbing Mount Everest, the good and certainly the bad, because there's certainly plenty of that. And Dana has always had such a great voice characters. And when I met Rose and Tate, who are the main characters of Above All Else, it was clear that she knew who they were. So of course, then the interesting part, at least from my end, is just seeing how the story develops. And one thing that always sticks in my mind is how Dana, when I read the very first draft of Above All Else, how much background there was. And we joke now how, the book actually started in the United States. Actually, it still starts in the United States. But in the first draft, a good, first half of the novel was all in the United States before they even went out to Nepal and to actually do the climb. So it was really interesting to watch how that evolved. And I realize now, having read the book several times, at least a dozen times or so, how, all of that, and this, I imagine, Monica, and if you talk about this a little bit, how Monica helped Dana. I mean, Dana did it on her own, and then how Monica helped her kind of take all of that part that took place in the United States and kind of condense it to a very, very small part of the novel, and have those characters actually be in Nepal and do what they needed to do to climb Mount Everest. So that to me was super interesting, because although she had to put a lot on the cutting room floor, I suppose, I feel like had she not done that, whether she does it in her mind or whether she actually writes it out, and in this case Dana had kind of written it all out, it was interesting to watch her have to learn about her characters and get all that background into the novel, even though it ended up in the cutting room floor. So it was really interesting to watch that, and it was interesting to kind of read the different iterations and watch them get to Nepal earlier and earlier and earlier in the novel. So anyway, to me that was super interesting. But it was her love, it was Dana's love of Rose and Tate and their relationship, also their own individual stories, combined with this love and interest in Mount Everest and kind of how to put all those two things together. So I had a ball just watching that evolve. And if it were up to me, I would publish all dozen different iterations of what became above all else, because it was so interesting to watch that.
So to me, it's so interesting to hear how it also changed before it even came to me. And yet how we both responded to exactly the same thing, which was the characters, right? Their voices and how strong they were and how they leapt off the page and how their relationship developed. And that's like the heart of the novel. So Dana, in your words, like, what do you see as, what is this book about?
So both of you are so lovely and generous, and I mean this book, more than any other I've written, is just hewn from rock. It was not easy to find the book. There were several books worth of cut scenes and pages. I mean, whole books fell to the ground as I recreated it. And both of you made it so much better than it was. Ironically, certain kernels of it are exactly what it always was, and other things, changed, somewhat dramatically, such as, cutting 50, 60 pages of backstory or whatever. I actually went back to check. I signed with Marietta as my agent in the fall of 2012, around a month before I went to Nepal for, and it was for a middle grade novel that subsequently got published. And in one of our early emails, I wrote, I'm working on a YA that takes place in Nepal. I look forward to talking to you about it soon. Soon, ha ha ha, that was 2012. So not so soon, not so fast, that's fine. Not all books come quickly. When I talk to kids about writing, I often say that, there's the what if, the famous what if. What if, a boy wizard wakes up at his aunt and uncle's, whatever. But the second question that is equally important but less asked is, so what? What if two teenagers climb Everest? So what? Yeah. I mean, it's exciting to climb a mountain or not climb a mountain or die on a mountain or live on a mountain, but so what? And that's the gut and heart and soul. You have a plot which might be as boring as a family takes a vacation, or it might be as exciting as life or death on a mountain, but so what? And I really, Marietta first and then Monica with you, had to dig in deeper and deeper to find that. What changed for these teenagers? Why should we care as readers, even though it's exciting, but so what? And it took a while to find that. And ultimately, that part of the story had to exist strong and important, whether or not they went on a day hike in the foothills in Colorado or whether they climbed Mount Everest. That all had to be there. And it took me a while to find it. So that was interesting and frustrating. And yet, as I said, certain things really didn't change that much, and Rose and Tate really didn't change very much from who they were. And so, for 8 years of noodling this story, it really was excavating more than creating. I knew who they were. I knew what I wanted them to be and how I wanted them to be. And I just wasn't there yet. I wasn't digging deep enough. So it was a very interesting process. It's more interesting now that it's over than it was in the middle of it. But I'm so grateful that both of you saw something enough that you wanted me to keep pushing for it and wanted to see that story come out.
And Monica, if you don't mind, I'll just very quickly add that, Dana, that's exactly, when you said that some kernels of it have remained exactly the same, that is so very true. And I think that even when we had that first conversation about Rose and Tate, what I knew for sure is that even if you didn't know exactly what their journey was going to be, there was something really interesting about them, enough that a reader would say, yes, please give it to me. You know, yes, please let me hear more of their story. You knew them really well, and you may not have seen the path clearly, but for me, it felt like, or in your brain, you saw it clearly. You just needed to get it out. And it was that understanding of character, and an understanding that they needed to be on the page because they had something important to say, even if you hadn't fleshed that out yet. And I know that's really weird to imagine, to think, but when I hear one of my clients talk about something, not with just, I mean, with passion, yes, but not just passion, but a deep understanding of either the characters or the story, or both, or, you know, whatever, it really, it makes it so that I can't help but ask you, have you written Rose and Tate yet? You know, how are they doing, kind of thing. So I know it's more difficult for you than it seemed for me. I'm like, you got this, but it was really, it was always there.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you thought so.
Yeah, I think that's important. Oh, look, your kitten.
There's a kitten. Yeah, yes, we should have actually put that in the beginning. I recently adopted kittens, and I am not responsible for whatever happens next. It's been mayhem. I had forgotten, I guess. I just had forgotten. Anyway, so there's one. That's Puma.
There.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm interested to know why Mount Everest. And, you know, in addition to why Mount Everest, what was your research process like?
Yeah. So the why is, I mean, that's like the big question. Why would anyone climb Mount Everest? I mean, when I say I went to Nepal, and I've been there twice, and I would love to go again, and I enjoy hiking a lot, but I'm not a mountaineer. And, you know, the highest I think we went around 16,000 feet, you know, 4,000 meters. And and we went slowly, and we acclimated, and we did everything right. And I was really uncomfortable. I am a sea level gal. You know, I was really, and yet it was so beautiful. It just, you know, it was hard to breathe for all the reasons. But before I started this book, there was sort of something in the news about a 13-year-old boy climbing Mount Everest. And my kids were right around that age, I think a little bit younger at that time. They were like, you know, maybe 8 and 10 or 9 and 11. And we're watching this kid who I will say was an extraordinary 13-year-old. I mean, he was like 5'10", and his father's an emergency medicine paramedic. And, you know, I mean, so it wasn't just like your next door neighbor kid. He was sort of unusual, but still, I mean, and his father and stepmother climbed with him, and his mother was at home, which I you know, supportive of it, but I was like, oh, no. You know, and I thought about what drives this kid to do it. What would it feel like to be the one left behind?
Yeah.
How do you, is it selfish to do something so dangerous and time consuming and expensive, or is it a noble cause? Is it a dream? What if you're raising money? Does that change anything? Not, you know, I mean, so all of that, what makes a person do this, and what does it mean to do that? Is it, you know, is it a noble goal or a selfish goal? And then you take in the global element of,
right,
you know, the country, which I so loved, and where we, you know, had an extraordinary time, you know, is incredibly poor. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. And you know, when I was there in my 20s, and I was there again in my 40s, and we had porters the second time, guides who worked with us and helped, and we were, you know, they were super with my kids, and we had a lot of fun with them. We played cards every night. We played Uno, like in the book. And I talked about when I had been there 20 years earlier, and we carried all our own stuff, and we like really roughed it. And one of our guides, Finja, was like, why the hell did you do it like that? And I was like, we were broke. And he's like, you're not broke, you're American. And, you know, I was like, yeah, fair point. I mean, I was a broke 20-year-old traveling the world, right, but I was a broke American traveling the world, you know, so,
yeah,
you know, that I remembered that for a long time. So I love that place. I think it is complicated to do anything, you know, and I think people who are that intensely driven have a lot going on back there. It takes something, you know, it takes something particular to drive a person to do that.
Yeah.
and I was really curious about who would do that and what it means. And, you know, here, a 13-year-old, I didn't write about 13-year-olds, I wrote about 18-year-olds. You know, they are embarking in these very new and sometimes dangerous feeling ways.
Yeah.
And there is selfishness inherent, and there is bravery, and there are ethical questions involved in what you choose to do next. So all of those things for every teenager who's setting out seem relevant, and then such an unusual type of person who does something like this. So that's what sort of dovetailed, all of those things dovetailed. You know, what kind of person does this? What does it mean to be a person who does this? Trying to get into that mindset, knowing I am not a person who does this, was really interesting.
I mean, to me, that was what was another compelling, in addition to sort of the characters and their particular story and their relationship and how it develops, that Mount Everest adventure sort of danger element was something that really drew me. And I think that a lot of people, you know, read about, you know, these Mount Everest trips, and then, and inevitably something goes wrong, right? And we're just like fascinated by it. So I think that we all have that interest, you know, in these crazy things that people do, right? That they accomplish and that they're able to accomplish.
Well, and the mystery and fascination with Everest never goes away. I mean, it's not like it's some esoteric thing that I was like, oh, this is weird and cool. I mean, it's forever bubbling up in the news because it's unimaginable, you know, and yet it's become like the sort of commercially accessible thing. If you are in good shape and have enough time and money, you're told you could probably do this, which is crazy to me. Like, you know, but that's what these big tour companies, I mean, they basically say we can sort of get anybody up Mount Everest. And with that hubris comes all kinds of tragedy, and you know, it just, and yet it's so beautiful and so special there that I almost sort of get the lure, but not really. So yeah, I mean, it remains this sort of fascinating thing. And that's one thing, as you know, so many years of working on this book, so many iterations, I never got tired of putting myself in that place and putting my, you know, really digging into it and thinking about what it was like to be there at this point all those years ago, and what it smelled like and what it felt like and what my muscles felt like and what the, you know, the solar hot showers felt like and what the smell of sort of thin cold air with the slight smell of curry coming out of every place you passed. I mean, it was just this very specific sensory experience, and living in that in my head never got old. It was always interesting to me. So that's good, because it was a while.
I think you incorporated all of that really well into the story, all those details. I mean, I could almost smell like the dung fire. Yeah, exactly.
And plus, Monica, and I think you'd agree, Dana's ability to bring up all those complicated questions through Rose and Tate, you know, without it sounding didactic or, you know, kind of this is how everyone should feel about this climb in general, but just talking about all those complicated questions as characters who were living through it was magical to me. I mean, I don't think I would never want to climb Mount Everest. Anyway, all the things that you said, Dana, about, you know, the complicated feelings on it, but to be able to live through it with Rose and Tate is something that I will forever be for, because it almost feels like I put myself there and I did some of it in a really weird way, because you really allowed the characters to go through those complicated questions and talk about them, and yet also have this amazing friendship and love story, and the whole thing was just really well woven.
Yeah, no, I agree. There was something you said earlier, Dana, about the person who's left behind. And so in the story, that's Mommy, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about this mother character.
Yeah, you know, there was more of her in earlier drafts, because more of it happened, you know, back in the U.S. and back as she's, you know, more in real time. And you know, it's a strange thing writing for kids and adults, kids and young adults as a parent, because I mean, one of the reasons I do write and I enjoy writing is I actually have a weirdly vivid memory. Like I have very specific memories of fairly young childhood and painfully vivid memories of teen years. And so that's why I enjoy it and I put myself in those characters. But I'm currently a parent. And so I'm currently much more in the head of the adults in the story who are not the story. I mean, they're really, Tate's dad and Mommy and these characters they're not the story. And yet that's the part that's most intensely current in my life. So I have to remind myself to step away from that and filter it through what I remember of being a teen. So for her, honestly, if I had all the time in the world, I would love to write a book from her point of view of what it was, her journey to, recognizing what she's losing, seeing what her daughter is gaining and able to do, all of that is such an incredible sort of place to think about. But as it was, what I wanted to do is I did not want to make a true tearjerker story. I did not want it to be, this dying mother and daughter rushing up a mountain, or that was not what I wanted to write. And I wanted her to have something going on that was serious enough that it really changed everything, but that wasn't as unambiguous as a fatal disease that was suddenly, sort of that it becomes a different kind of book. And it, I didn't want to write that. And so, I really wanted her to mean it when she says to her daughter, I am so happy you're doing this. I am so proud of you, and you are an incredible climber, and this is the thing you should be doing right now. Because, funnily enough, I started this book 8 years ago, but last year my son got on a plane on August 31st and left for Patagonia for 7 months. I didn't see him for 7 months. And, the only thing to say is, this is awesome. I'm so proud of you. This is exactly where you should be. And, that's a hard thing to have to do. And she's a brave, incredible mom. So I wanted her to complicate Rose's feelings, but I didn't want her to be anything but Rose's biggest fan. Rose's, I wanted her to, that not to be a piece where, it wasn't, does she feel guilty? Does she feel this? And there was added in late, as you know, draft number 7012, right before it was supposed to be in copy edits, when I was like, wait, I think it would be better if, Rose and she have a little bit more of a clash early on. Not that Rose doesn't want to climb, not that she's being pushed into it, but that she's a teenager who, she wants the payout, she wants to take this trip, but like it takes an enormous amount of training. There's times you don't want to climb with your mom, you want to actually do your other things. And, so I wanted there to be a little bit more of that without it being as clear cut as, oh, her mother pushed her into this. This was never her, that wasn't it. It was just, once her mom's taken out of the picture, she has to ask, who's pushing me now? Am I pushing me? And the answer, of course, is yes. She does. She wants this enough for herself. But I felt that was a late breaking shift in my mind that was really important. That she had to feel the difference between her mom kind of nudging her along and her recognizing that I want this. Like this was not, because that's another thing that you see as a parent of older teens is that at a certain point, you stop doing that. And, it's like a kid on training wheels. You let go or, taking off the training wheels and they keep biking or they don't, but you have to let go and see what happens next. And that's sort of what wound up happening, in a pretty intense way for Rose and her mom.
Right. No, so I think I love that you have such a strong relationship, and one character is pretty much missing for the whole book, but she's there.
But
and
she's
so that's
there.
but she's there. She's always there. And, so she is one of the driving forces behind why Rose, it does the things she does and climbs. And for Tate, what do you see as his driving force?
Yeah, sweet Tate. I have a lot of sympathy for Tate. I think, so Tate has ADHD, which I have, and it only got diagnosed as an adult, but it's like one of those rear view mirror things where you're like, Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And my son has it, and so these things that that were very recognizable in myself, and in that I gave to Tate, and this idea of sort of agreeing to something and wanting something, and not really, if I'm honest, I think it often serves me well. I don't always think through all of the consequences of the down the road, and so I agree to things sometimes that I probably, like, in retrospect, I'm like, why would I have, but I've agreed, and so I just press on, and usually it works out okay. But I think that this was one of those, he did agree, he wants this. This is something, he identified, and also this idea as a teen that we all still, even as adults, but you shorthand yourself. This is what I am. I'm a surfer and a skateboarder, and and I make music, or I'm a cross country runner and I win, races, or whatever it is, however we sort of think about ourselves. And, it's a pretty cool and convenient shorthand. He's a climber. He's good at it. Unlike other parts of his life that feel a little more ambiguous, this is one where he can just, like, settle into that and, call himself that. And so it's, he's sort of driven by momentum of the whole process. Everybody else, his father, his best friend, his own interests, his own self-identification, and it sort of sweeps him along without a whole lot of forethought of what is it going to be like. Because I like climbing, am I going to like a 3-month, very slow, deliberate, crowded commercial climb that works in this way? No, it wouldn't have occurred to him to parse that out. He's a climber, he loves to climb, this is a big deal, and so that is something I've recognized in my own life, where something in theory is great, and then sort of once you're into the details of it, it's like, this doesn't make sense at all, this isn't even my thing, this isn't, I don't like this, I don't want this, and the guilt and embarrassment that I've agreed to it. I was not, nobody forced me. And so I can't really, blame anyone else, although I might try. But it is that sort of late breaking realization. And so, it made perfect sense that this was going to define Tate to himself, until, what he loves about climbing and what Mount Everest offers are very, very different, notwithstanding everything else going on with him. But that wouldn't have occurred to him because it was just sort of, as I said, it just sort of drove him along with it. And it's very hard when you think of yourself as not that great at a lot of things to let go of the one thing that you think you're good at. And so I think, he broke my heart again and again writing his character. He was one who I felt all his feelings very much. Yeah.
I did too, I have to say. Like, he just leapt off the page and felt so real, and so I think it's really, I don't want to stereotype at all, but I also have people with ADHD in my family, and it was so true. Like, it just felt like so true, like his reactions and the way he thinks and what he does and how he acts, and I just really appreciated that and seeing that.
Yeah.
That was
I will always be grateful for Rick Riordan for the fact that, years ago, my son and his best friend were, like, using lightsabers in the hallway, having just read Percy Jackson, and one of them was like, dude, I'm totally a demigod. And the other one was like, yeah, same, I have ADHD, I'm totally a demigod. That was like the beginning of a very different conversation in our house. That it was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Now I'm going to think of Tate as the demigod.
Yeah, for sure.
But he was. Yeah, I know. It's like
be there.
Really great characters. I guess what I would ask now, in addition to asking our participants, you are free to ask questions in the chat. I just wanted to mention that as well. If you have questions for Dana or for any of us, you can definitely leave them there. But sort of, what how do you feel now when the book is done? You cannot make any more changes.
Are you sure, Monica?
No, it's like, we just approved the proof. Sorry. It is printing as we speak. So how does that feel? You've been working on this book for years now, and how do you go out into the world with that now? And you know, to me that's fascinating. I'm, you know, I from the editorial side, it's just not the same. Like, I'm so excited when a book comes out, but yeah, I'm not the author, you know, sort of waiting on the rest of the reviews or for reactions from the teens, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's the big one, waiting for reactions from teens. I mean, I think Marietta can attest, I don't usually write a book for 8 years. Like, I'm fairly quick generally, and I'm pretty good at letting go. Like, ultimately, I turn in pretty good first drafts, mostly, sometimes not, and then I clean them up, and then they're like well on their way. I mean, honestly, if I could, I'd probably like grab it back and change it again, which is, you know, not my norm. But it is still it is the story I wanted to tell. I still am never, you know, it's not perfect, and there are things that I am always wanting to fuss with in this particular story, but it is the story I wanted to tell, and so and it's coming out in the middle of a pandemic and you know, an economic crisis, and a month before, or 3 weeks before an election, and you know, I have you know, always as an author, my ability to promote and market a book is negligible. Like, there's only so much, you know, song and dance that's gonna get the book out there. But I'll do bookstore events, or I'll do conferences, what have you. This is a weird year. I don't know what'll happen with this book. I really hope it finds its way to readers. I mean, you know, obviously everybody would love to see it like suddenly become Oprah's favorite book and whatever, but notwithstanding that, I would love it to find its way to readers, and I would love, you know, I would love teens to read it and connect with it, not because they're all climbing Mount Everest, but because they're growing up and separating from their parents and having hard conversations and seeing their life change, and all these things that are more universal than climbing a mountain. And so, you know, ultimately when I want to fuss with it, or when I worry that it won't, you know, get out there enough, I remember that I've wanted to tell this story for a really long time, and I did, and you found it, and it's got an incredible cover, and it's been edited to something way better than it was, and so that makes me really happy. Sort of whatever happens next, that makes me really, really happy. So I have to sort of keep that as my focus, as opposed to thinking like, oh no, will bookstores order books? Will, you know, I can't, you know, should I put on a mask and sign books in Cambridge? Maybe, I don't know. You know, I mean, that is ultimately, you know, you can't do a lot with this. So, so I'm glad it's going to be in the world. I hope it can get to people. It certainly offers escapism if somebody's, you know, looking for a story to take them away. This is definitely taking them away, and possibly also making them grateful not to be totally away, because I'd rather be at home than on the side of Mount Everest in a snowstorm. So, you know, there's that, a little counting my blessings. But yeah, I am excited for it to be out in the world. It's a good feeling.
And Monica, I can tell you that I will remind her to throw some confetti at herself, and have her family throw some confetti at her, because it has been a really labor of love, for sure. And it is a beautifully told story. So I will remind her of that every single day.
I mean, I have to also say that, I mean, there's just so much there, which is really what's also was very appealing to me, because we have the adventure, we have the well-developed family relationships, we have these characters who are unique, and yet when they interact, like, it's just kind of blows you away, you know, how, you know, that relationship. And then you have, you know, the political issues, the real political issues, you know, involved in the climbing Mount Everest, and you talk about the Sherpa people, and there's an end note, and further reading about that at the end of the book. So all these, you know, so it's very topical, it's very current, you know, we're all sort of struggling with these questions about, living in a global society, and what that means, and the kinds of I guess, the kinds of questions we have to ask ourselves all the time, and how are we the best global citizens we can be. So it's got that too. So I feel like it's got a little bit of everything, and so I have a hard time sometimes when people ask me what the book is about to really settle on one thing, because there are so many themes you can really pull out, and it kind of just depends on what you read it for. So I feel like it's one of those books that truly has something for everyone. And we've gotten a few reviews up on NetGalley, and some reviews from kids, and it is absolutely, each person sort of picks what they need from the book. Whether or not it's the romance or it's the adventure part of it. And it's kind of funny reading that some of those comments, it'll be like, oh, I love the adventure part, but I don't know about that kissing. So it's really funny what people take away from it. But I can truly say that there's something there you're going to take away.
Yeah, well, that is cool. I that it is a lot. When you put it that way, it's true. I guess people could come at it from different places and be, either most interested in this, these characters and their banter and their relationship, and be moving through the, trying to page turn as fast as they can through the climbing, because it's anyway, let's get back to what, whatever, and or vice versa, sort of depending. But yeah, I hope people do find what they need in that story. And I think there is, because it's such a unique, most of us will not climb Mount Everest. Most teenagers are not going to take off 3 months and, do this, but there's so much in it that I hope readers do find and feel connected to about their journey, not related to their trip up the mountain.
Right, exactly. And I also think that, I think you do hear more stories now of teenagers doing amazing things, right? So that is also something that I think that is, yes, it doesn't happen that frequently, but you do hear more about it, and it just feels so real in that way. Absolutely, this could happen, right?
Yeah, it could. It does,
And I will say that if nothing else, or along with that, everyone has their own mountain to climb. Not to be cheesy about it, but we all have our mountain to climb. So I although I've never planned to climb Mount Everest, I remember myself as a teen having struggles and having things that felt like mountains. And I think that the ability to relate to the story in that way is really powerful. You could never even think about climbing Mount Everest, and yet you will find yourself feeling like either Rose or Tate, or sometimes both, because you're experiencing that same kind of struggle of being a teenager and figuring out what the world is all about. And sure, this is a kind of bigger scene as far as having it actually be in Mount Everest, but it really is very relatable to those who are just living their lives and not even thinking about Everest. So for that aspect, I think as well, I would hand this book to any teen, simply because they will be going through something similar, even if in a smaller scale.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, ultimately one of the sort of, without being spoilery about it, but what happens on the mountain, what they accomplish or don't accomplish, is ultimately beside the point for what Rose and Tate each need to deal with. In themselves, with their parents, with their lives, they can't, that's the so what. It didn't solve, what the question asked by Mount Everest is not the question that they needed to answer. And so each of them, what happens for them on the mountain, they think that it's going to give them something specific, and it doesn't. It's a so what are you going to do next? What are you doing with that? Is that going to be enough to change you? No, you have to do the next thing. You have to have the hard conversation, or you have to be honest with someone, or you have to be honest with yourself, or whatever it is. And that, I think is really important. We sometimes, as both teens and adults, there's sort of this, if I accomplish this, if I get into the school of my dreams, I'm therefore a success. I've gotten that external validation. Or if I graduate, I've done this. Or if I can get my grades to this point, or if I make this team. And ultimately, those don't you know, they may well get you to some next thing, but they don't ultimately answer, you know, the question. If you define your success by that, you will then lose it if it doesn't go well once you get there. If you do, you know, and so for each of these characters, you know, this is this giant goal that they think is going to determine, you know, I will not be scared anymore, or I will be a successful climber, or I will be this, or I will be brave enough to do that. And it isn't. I mean, it's not going to answer that for them. They're going to have to go deeper. So I think that is really true, you know, to your point, Marietta, whether or not you're climbing a mountain or just, I just have to get to graduation. You know, if I can get through this and get to graduation, everything will be okay. No, it won't. You have to deal with whatever's, you know, making it so hard, because you're going to bring it with you. You bring yourself wherever you go. And that's, I think, important for all of us, but especially for teens leaving one life and going to the next, sort of keeping that in mind is really important.
Yeah.
Right. No, and I love that the teens are older too. You know, and there aren't a lot of YA books where teens are really pushing that, like the 18 to 19 period, where they're about to go off to college, and there's discussion of getting into colleges and going off to school, like in the book. And so I think that's really kind of a nice age to write about, because there's so much going on in like a teen's life. Yeah. Right, exactly. So it's nice to have that, and I think you really hit the nail on the head when you're talking about there are no easy resolutions, and so, you know, this book resolves in a nice way, but it's very clear that the characters go on, right, and their lives go on, and there's like still things that they have to deal with and process, especially like around the climb. So, you know, it's not all given to you tied up nicely with a bow. So that's what I also like about it.
Definitely, there's more in there.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was like, it's sad that it's over. I wonder what happens next. So, you know, I'm kind of curious too how you wrote about, you know, your secondary characters like Yoon Soo and Luke, who are, you know, are Korean and French characters in the book, and how they came to you and how you sort of developed them. You know, like it seems like for a lot of authors, the main characters kind of like are fully formed or pop into the head, or you know, but how do you do the secondary characters? How do you come up with that?
Yeah. I mean, so that's a good question, and it was tricky because, I mean, you don't want name soup on a mountain. You don't want dozens of characters sort of flying around here and there, but there are hundreds of people involved with every climb. I mean, there, you know, I mean, even a team of 2 or 3, there's hundreds of support people, and there's, you know, so it was a balancing act to figure out how to get a sort of enough people in it to be both realistic and fleshed out, but also not so many as to just make it confusing, especially when it really is Rose and Tate's story. And so, and the mountain is, so Mount Everest is global. I mean, the climbers come from all over the world, of course. And so that was a piece that was sort of, you know, seemed very clear that there should be, you know, there should be people from around the world on this team. And, you know, at the risk of wanting them to be, you know, to be ciphers or to be stand-ins, I wanted to illustrate some of the kinds of people who climb Everest. So we're deep in the heads of 2 teenagers who climb Everest, who are sort of unusual in some ways, unusual in others, because they're wealthy Americans who, you know, have the resources to put behind this and have climbed, you know, they've dedicated enormous amounts of their life to it. So that's not that unusual for climbers, but I wanted some other people who are driven, you know, whether it's by ambition or whether it's by something else, or, you know, whether it's by, you know, a little bit of running away from, you know, there's sort of a Peter Pan thing of like, if I stay young and climb mountains forever, I don't have to grow up and face the rest of my life. There's, you know, there's being excellent at something and, you know, not allowing yourself to be anything but excellent. So, you know, these are a little bit of archetypes of the kinds of people who climb. I've read dozens and dozens of memoirs, biographies, autobiographies, blog posts, watched documentaries of climbers. I mean, these people are nuts. Like, it takes a certain kind of nuts person to be like, I know what I want to do. I want to watch my toes freeze off over 3 months while spending $100,000 on the side of a very crowded mountain. Like, it's, you know, but this is, you know, it is a compelling e-day fix for people who just can't get it out of their minds and do. And so both of them, but they had to be human, right? I mean, I didn't want them to be, you know, people who go up the mountain next to our main characters, just as, you know, a paper doll sort of walks up because there's a crowd on the mountain. You know, the way when you have a play, there are, you know, in the set you could paint people on and have them move behind them. They needed to be real people, and we needed to care about them and care, you know, despite the fact that they are a little bit of these archetypes. You know, oh, I'm ambitious. Oh, I'm, you know, sort of. You know, they're human, and they were lovely people. And in my mind, I cared a lot about them, which made it hard to write scary things and, you know, create a world where not everything works out perfectly. But I felt like they were really, you know, an amalgamation of things that I could understand and little snippets of people I know mixed with, you know, so many stories I read about what makes these people want to do this. So yeah, they became very real to me as I went. They started as more, okay, I need other climbers, maybe I'll do this and that. And then, you know, they sort of grew ever more human, which made it harder in a lot of ways. But, you know.
It does. I'd say there's some painful, sad moments. yes, in this story. Yeah. You know, but again, that's the reality, honestly, actually, of this endeavor, right? It is super dangerous. It's, you know, it is what it is. Exactly. And then how did you approach writing, you know, about Binyo and the other Sherpa guides that we encounter in the story?
Yeah. Again, based on people I knew when I was there, and also based on some really wonderful documentaries and memoirs written by Sherpas who you know, have worked in the climbing industry for a dozen years or more. So, you know, certain things were sort of ripped from the headlines of, you know, my life, you know, comments or I mean, I have a photo of our friend and guide Finjo with a kitten in his pocket. And on our trek, you know, he was this tiny kitten and he put it in his pocket, which, you know, I have one of the characters do. And, you know, we played cards with them a lot. And we, you know, we talked a little bit about why they, you know, what I remember early on, a friend of mine who'd done a lot of research in Nepal, he's a geologist. And he said, oh, I have somebody who may, you know, a Sherpa friend who may want to guide for you. And he said he's climbed Everest twice. And, you know, and I said, well, if he's a climber, like, he's not going to want to schlep around with a bourgeois family from Massachusetts. And he's like, he gets paid to hang out with you guys, or he gets paid to risk his life on the mountain. I'm pretty sure he's going to enjoy hanging out with you guys for a couple. And it was like, it never, I mean, to me, climbing is such a, you know, in America, it's a macho, expensive, you know, bragging rights thing. A climber, you know, a Jimmy Chin or whatever is not going to come and, like, you know, hang out with me for a 3-week trek in the Maine mountains. But his point was, you know, he could make good money working with your family, who you're great people and you'll have fun. Why wouldn't he want, you know, it's not an ego thing. He's been to Everest. He doesn't particularly want to go again. He would love to do this. So, so yeah, it was sort of a reminder of the financial benefit of climbing Everest, and that drives, I mean, there's also glory, and there are certainly Sherpa climbers who climb because they love climbing or because they have that draw to go up the mountain, same as Western climbers and international climbers, but a lot climb because it's a really good paycheck. And so that, you know, that couldn't really be ignored.
Right.
I know Donna's telling us we're going to be wrapping up soon. So
Yes, I do see that. It's been lovely. I'm going to share the screen again just to show the cover again.
It's so pretty.
Yay!
I love this cover. I mean, I love this cover. I want a poster of this cover in my house.
Oh, that would be amazing. I have to say I mean, a nice little bonus is that the artist is a climber himself and has climbed in Nepal. So I think that I you know, that obviously comes through right?
Yeah, it's just gorgeous. I should write him a fan letter. I really should.
I know. His name is Levante Zavo, and I'm not sure I even said that right, but
I totally follow him on Instagram. I like went right there and love up on all his art. He's really good.
Yes,
really good.
Yes, I had to say it was just perfect, and it's really nice sometimes when a cover comes together like that.
Hi, Don.
And of course, we could
Thank
spend.
you so much, you guys. Thank you so much. This is fascinating stuff. I've been lurking in the background listening. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. And please know that there are galleys for download in our booth, as well as a discussion guide. So this would be a great one for any of your teen book clubs. And you can sign up for our early access teen book club too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's been great. It's been so
much,
lovely.
Thank you.
All right. This is awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
All right.
Have a great
good day.
rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.